Okay, I'm super excited to welcome everyone to Persuasion 2025, the second in an annual series that will hopefully go for forever, basically. So some of you probably know, for those that don't, I'm James Slezak, CEO and founder of Swayable. We're going to have some incredible discussions and then get you guys some food and drink at the end. So if you're hungry or thirsty, that will take care of that. For those that don't know what Swayable does, Swable's a tech platform that measures persuasion. So that's how we got the idea to host this. We're very proud to work with folks responsible for some of the most important and exciting high-impact campaigns around the world, many of them here. And those folks use our tech to measure in advance to pre-test their ads and messages. And that way they know what's going to work before they run campaigns, before they spend all the money to promote the ads. The big question that really motivates our work has always been, how do we change minds? And this industry that most of us here are in, I think is rapidly moving out of a stage where we saw the answer to that question. We saw success just as defined in terms of views and clicks or impressions. I think now people are realizing that the real question is, are we having an impact on what people think or feel, their intentions? So as a result, are we having success at the big picture storytelling that really defines what actions large numbers of people take? Those actions shape our world and the marketplaces that we do business in. So what makes us different here is that we try to approach these questions as scientists, and we try to see science as something really inclusive rather than a sort of a credential that someone pins a badge on your lapel or your LinkedIn page. Nike has this cute line that I like in their mission statement: if you have a body, you're an athlete. And we like to think if you care about science, if you care about truth, you're a scientist. So the point is, it's not some elite club that people in lab coats just sort of know everything about. It's just a way to ask questions better and get better and better answers. And there's a real emphasis on being upfront about what's known and not known, uncertainty, even quantifying that uncertainty, and also just really sweating out the details in the lab to do a better measurement. So we really see that as our job. So how do we persuade better? It's a really easy question to ask, but unpacking it gets us to a whole lot of even more difficult questions about how we transform industries, technologies, campaigns, and ways of working. And since that can only really happen by convening folks at the center of those changes, we've tried to create this event here to bring together a community of practice in the spirit of this kind of curiosity and inquiry that we really think is the cultural touchstone for our team. So I just want to say a really huge thanks to all of you for being part of it and taking time out of your busy schedules, no doubt, to come and join us up here. And I want to, before I throw it to Max from Semafor, give a particular thanks to Scott and Kat, wherever they are, over here at the back, for making all of this happen from Swable, as well as the whole Swable team, and our board of advisors, who very kindly have come from all around the country to join us, as well as also Emily and Andrew from Hunt and Gather, who were a key part of putting it together. So now it's time to introduce Max, who is going to persuade us. He's definitely going to moderate our first session, Persuading Through the Chaos. Max covers media for Semafor, which is a fantastic, one of the new wave of media startups that I think, if you're not on all their lists, you should be.
Please subscribe.
Please subscribe, like, share, and subscribe. Max covers media for Semafor and previously wrote for Daily Beast and Business Insider, as well as being on the White House team at Politico, which means, as I understand it, he knows a thing or two about chaos. Max Tani.
That is true. All right. Thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. This will be a little bit easier, I feel like, than the White House press briefing room. So I want to introduce our panel here from I guess left or closest to me to furthest to the left. I'm trying to figure that out. But first, my name is Max Tani. I cover media for Semafor. I write a once-a-week newsletter called the Semafor Media Newsletter, and I host a podcast with our editor-in-chief, Ben Smith, called Mixed Signals. And we really think about the changing media landscape and the way in which people receive information and how that's rapidly changing in this kind of new media environment, and how that changes people's perspectives on the world. Obviously, we've seen a lot of that over the last several months, and luckily for me, that's going to continue to change. So I'll have a lot to write and speak about. So today we're going to talk a lot about that chaos in the kind of information ecosystem and how that affects all of these people and how they shape it. So closest to me, we have Maura McGill, who's the global head of policy and paid media at DoorDash. Then we have Franklin Parrish, who is the head of marketing and creative service at Kaiser, and Brynna Aylward, the chief creative officer at DDB. So Franklin, you were saying to me, we did this prep call about a week ago where, we kind of went over what we were going to chat about up here, but then, Franklin, interestingly enough, comes up to me right over there beforehand and says, I've actually changed my whole idea completely, which is interesting to hear 5 minutes before the panel starts. So Franklin, you changed your mind about the meaning of persuasion in a week. Walk us through that a little bit.
Okay, thanks. So on the prep call, so just so you know, Kaiser Permanente is, unless you're on the West Coast, unless you have lived on the West Coast, is probably the biggest healthcare organization that you've never heard of. When we were on the prep call, I said that persuasion is essentially a means to an end. As a marketer, persuasion is largely a tool because I need people to take an action to support a business need. But the conversation that we had was that actually that sounds a little transactional. And when I think about what I tell other marketers, what I tell my students around storytelling, and around being empathetic towards your audiences and their needs. Persuasion is a step along a journey. And so when you are addressing your audience and you are assessing what their needs are, what their problems are, what their dreams are, persuading them means that you're starting a conversation with them and you're expressing and you are kind of relating your brand through that filter and telling them and showing them that you are relevant and that you are interested in solving their problems. And I think that's what persuasion's all about.
So let's take a step back here and think about the kind of the theme for this panel, which is kind of navigating your way kind of through the chaos. Obviously, we all know because we experience it. There are 1 million ways to get and receive information and content. We're glued to our phones. My screen time is every week when I get the report is insane. Not to mention the time that I'm not spending on my phone. So, I want to ask, and I want to direct this at each of you, but we'll start with you, Brynna. What do you see as the biggest obstacles to persuasion in this particular crowded information landscape? Let's start with the hardest question first.
Tiny question. I think it's exactly that. It's the crowded information landscape. It's the fact that there's so many messages out there. There's so many different people talking about so many different things on so many different platforms. Breaking through is a huge, huge challenge in today's world. So I would say it's just that. It's the overload of information. It's trying to find the ways that you can get your message through a crowd that's shouting.
Maura, let's go to you and then Franklin.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think I read a stat this morning that was something like the average consumer sees 8,000 brand impressions per day. That seems completely insane to me. But when it comes to actual messages that resonate, it's something as small as 12 of those 8,000. So if you think about the challenge that we all face up here trying to get people to pay attention to our messages, I don't think it's that we're even competing with other brands necessarily. I think it's that we're just trying desperately to get the attention of the consumer who is experiencing banner blindness and is just not even paying attention whatsoever. How do you break through that? And that to me is the thing that I think about. It's not thinking about what are the competitors doing, what are the other like cool memes and trends that are going on. It's like, what's going on in the mind of my target audience and my consumer, and like, how do I make my message top of mind for them? So that's the thing that I lose sleep over every night. And, so we can talk a lot, I'm sure we will, about different channel mix and platforms and how we try to compose messages. But that's the thing that I think is overarching right now.
Yeah, and before we get to that, Franklin, what do you think?
So you're both right that that the landscape is overloaded, but what else is true is that trust is being drained from the landscape, and so there's all of these messages that are coming at you. None of them you can truly believe. Because we have created this ecosystem where you just can't believe anything anymore, and so there is this extra cognitive load that's being put on the consumer. It's like, okay, so we're going to sift through these thousands of messages, but then that 12 that break through, now we've got to go and see, like, okay, well, is this really true? Like, do I have now? I've got to go check and double check and see like what I've got to fact check everything that comes through my filters. And I'm in healthcare, which is an industry which is notorious. I mean, we get ambivalence and we're happy about ambivalence, right? So yeah, trust is a big factor.
So, we talked about, we kind of referenced, misinformation and lack of trust. We've talked about just the sheer volume of content. We've got a lot of increasing amount of slop out there. So, Maura, what do you think, when you think about those 12 messages that stick with people, and when you think about building trust, I mean, what do you think is the key to building trust over time? Because that does seem to be the key to persuasion. I mean, persuasion seems to be more difficult. It's not just making an impression on someone, once somebody noticing something or remembering. It's like truly convincing them of an idea. What do you think is key to being one of those 12?
Well, I will caveat this with what I do is more specifically in the world of creating ads for policy and like the political space. So I'm not trying to sell a product necessarily. But in that regard, I think building trust can be these might be fighting words, but I think it can be more challenging because there's a lot of lack of trust, frankly, in that space. People are being inundated with messages being told that they should care about a certain issue. And it can be extremely overwhelming. I think in order to build trust, for me, it's really about establishing a relationship with the core audience initially, and slowly building awareness first, and then getting to a place of trust, and then hopefully getting to a place of favorability before in my case, you would eventually want them to take some sort of action, like an advocacy ask. But it takes time. If I had the cure, I would be selling a book and it would be on Oprah's book list and I'd be very wealthy.
So, Brynna, I'm curious, because we've already alluded to it, Maura was alluding to it a little bit here, but how much of persuasion is negative persuasion, like persuading, how much of what you think about is persuading someone to trust, someone, a client that you're working on versus the competitor?
I think that for us in particular, we have a little bit less of an uphill battle than you might face in the policy space. For us, the thing that really can break through and have that persuasive thing behind it is emotion, right? So having that feeling that breaks through, you remember the ads that evoke that surprise or make you laugh or make you cry or make you want to share it with your friends. And that is, I think, fundamentally what started a lot of us in this business, started me at least in this business, getting that emotion that makes you really excited about an idea and a product behind it. And I think that that's the thing that will stay no matter what technology does, no matter what the future holds. It all comes back to if you can make that emotional connection, whether it be on TikTok or a TV spot or in an email. It's just making that that connection with people.
I'm really curious. I've been thinking obviously a lot about influencers. I'm sure plenty of people in this room work with creators all the time and influencers all the time. I'm really curious. I have a two-part question here, and this is for anybody on the panel. But I'm curious how you guys measure success of an influencer campaign, and I'm curious whether you guys think influencers and creators are better at persuasion, or better, worse, different. I'm really curious because it seems like obviously that's a new tool and a new lever. I would imagine maybe they're more persuasive. What do you guys think?
I mean, I can take a stab at this. Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily use influencers on a widespread level, but the national team is experimenting with that. But it goes back to trust though, because building trust is about relevancy and about consistency, right? You think about the people that you trust in your own lives. The reason that you trust them is because they are consistent with their behavior and they behave in a way that that matches the expectations that they have set in your life, right? When someone starts behaving weirdly, then you start to distance yourself from them. So trust comes from that consistency. You get the attention by being relevant, right? So influencers, and I'm talking about like the micro, the nano influencers who are kind of in that middle funnel space, right, where you're in the consideration. And those influencers are demonstrating a level of expertise or a level of knowledge about the subject that makes them experts and makes them trustworthy. You want to listen to their opinions. I think they can be very influential for brands, especially if you've got, let's say, a brand or a product or a concept that needs a lot of explaining, and you need a voice other than the brands to kind of bring it home for the prospect, right? You talk about like, emotional relevancy, right? So take that like one step further, because it got to the point where I would see that commercial with, and I know Sarah McLachlan doesn't do it anymore, but the one with
Yes,
the pets
we all
or
know.
whatever.
Yes.
And I've got to turn the bloody TV set off because not only is it just sad, but at the end of it, I feel manipulated, right? Because I know that it's playing on my emotions, right? And it's not it's blunt force trauma, right? Yeah, right.
Rude. Wow.
I don't have an opinion. Between that and the catheter ads, I was like, God, I can't even turn the TV on. But anyway, but if you get more sophisticated about it and you start thinking about like what are the emotional motivators, right? You think of Maslow's hierarchy of need, or you think about maybe like archetypal needs. Control or connection or whatever. So if you start getting emotionally relevant that way, you can start to build trust, and using those voices that are arrayed around the brand, I think can be quite powerful in kind of getting the audience connected.
Brynna, I have a question for you. Do you feel that there are any ways in which the public's perceptions have changed in recent years in a way that influences persuasion? Like, are there messages that just work that you think are resonating now that maybe weren't resonating a year or two ago? Because emotion, obviously, if emotion is at the core of these things, obviously it's linked to values. There's large conversations about values that have shifted and changed a lot, over the last several years. So I'm really curious what you think about that.
I think that what resonates with people just from an emotional standpoint varies from moment to moment based on what's happening in culture. And you can see that, like, for instance, with the Super Bowl this past year, everyone wanted like that warm hug. They wanted the humor back. They didn't want to be confronted with too much, right? We all kind of there's a lot happening in the world on every level, right? So we all needed that little kind of reprieve and that moment to laugh a little bit and not take ourselves so seriously. So I think what people need changes from moment to moment. They never need the Sarah McLachlan, I'm with you. No, none of us ever need that, no. Yeah.
So I guess, and Maura, you mentioned this before. You said we would get into platform stuff, so I think we should absolutely do that. What are are there particular social platforms that you find are better or more conducive to persuasion? What do you think?
Yes, I do. But again, I will caveat it with, I think it really depends on what your product or service or message is and who your audience is. You have to meet your audience where your audience is where they are. In my case, and some people have a hard time believing this because it feels culturally irrelevant right now, but a lot of my audiences that I'm targeting are, voters in certain states where we're trying to persuade them to change their hearts and minds about a certain policy issue. And these people, I can give an example. We're running a campaign right now in Wisconsin, and the persuadable voters that we're trying to target skew a lot older. They're more rural, and where do they consume their media? It's on linear TV and then on Facebook. Yep. So, and also, we have historically, at least on the policy team, have had very high video completion rates on Facebook among these audiences. So for us, when you speak specifically about social platforms, that is one for us that has pretty consistently worked really well across various campaigns. But as far as other potential platforms, I would say we're really big on connected TV, OTT right now, just because, to your point about building trust and message saturation, I need to make sure that people are actually watching the ad to completion. If they're only watching the first 2 seconds, it's not going to land. So we've had a lot of success with that.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think the watch through rates are satisfactory in your view?
On connected TV?
Yeah.
Just because viewers are not able to skip through. I think it's you're forced to watch the ad. That's part of it, but I think it's kind of the nature of the platforms. But, we wouldn't have the same success if we tried to run a 30-second spot on TikTok, for example. It just wouldn't,
Right.
It wouldn't be the right platform, and people would skip through.
Right. So I'm really curious, Franklin, persuasion. I'm curious about persuasion misconceptions. What do you think is something that would have worked 5 or 10 years ago, a tactic or a strategy that just is not working today?
I think leveraging institutions, probably, because institutions are very nearly bankrupt at this point.
Is that hard as a healthcare, provider?
Well, yeah. When I'm thinking about when I say institutions, right? Like getting the media to carry water for you anymore as a brand, right? The media can't do it anymore. Using traditional kind of PR, PR efforts, I don't think work anymore. The media landscape is way too fragmented. Brands, I think, have to get in the business of being more holistic about how they present themselves. It's not just about like paid advertising. It's about strategic communications. It's about public relations. It's about like what's your sponsorship strategy? What's your community relations strategy? Like how does all of this tie in to kind of build up your, you know, kind of like ladder back to your overall business and brand strategy? Because you can't, like the landscape has changed to the point where you truly cannot depend on having any, let's say, like natural allies within the media landscape anymore.
Sure. Brynna, same question for you. What would have worked 5 years ago or 10 years ago that's not working for you today?
I think there's a few things that have obviously shifted, but I think you raised an interesting point with institutions that I was having a conversation earlier today actually about the shift from people trusting a celebrity just because they're a celebrity to micro-influencers and smaller individuals. Like if you look at like Glossier, they built a whole brand just based around that. And like that is a huge shift from I think where we were 5 years ago and just have been historically. Just because some incredible celebrity is buying a product or is the face of a product doesn't mean that has no bearing on me as an individual consumer. So I think that's a big shift that we've seen.
Yeah, I want to ask an AI question. I'm curious. You know, I was talking to a buddy of mine today who was planning a vacation around after Cannes, and he was saying, he was like, I just asked ChatGPT to give me like a bunch of hotel recommendations like in Venice or something like this, and I'm really curious, and this is for all of you guys. How much of your job today is, as kind of AI overtakes search, is persuading AI of your message? Start with you, Maura. Unless we want to pass. Yeah. I need to think about that. Yeah, sure. What do you think?
It's funny you should mention because I got into an argument with AI, and actually I won. I gave it an assignment and it didn't want to do it because it thought it was like, well, it's kind of ethically blah 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 blah. And I was like, well, let's talk about your ethics. And so we had this discussion, and it was like, oh well, now that you've put it that way, okay. And then it was actually a kind of a political kind of simulation that I built. You might be interested in. But yeah, AI is a tricky business because the reliance that we are creating on AI and the blindness with which we're starting to develop blind spots with AI, I think, and we have to remember that AI can hallucinate. AI has learned how to cheat, and AI is going to give you the answer that it believes is going to be the most satisfactory. So we have to be mindful of all of that.
Yeah.
That said, I use AI more as a tool to help me get a more robust answer to the answer that I already know.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Brynna, what do you think?
I love this question because creatively it makes me like, oh my gosh, that's an amazing brief. Like, I want to do that. Like, how do I convince the AI to sell my product? Because you're right, that is the future. That's where we're headed, right? Like, which product is better, X or Y? And if you're convincing the AI, it's going to tell that to consumers. So to me, that's an incredible brief and like potential media lion if you saw that. So I love that.
If somebody comes up with the answer to that question, they may not.
Please come talk to me.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we've got only a few more minutes here. We've got time for one more question, and then we'll open up to you guys. I'm curious, and again, I want to kind of go down the line. What's a persuasive argument that you've seen, Maura, from a competitor that you think has worked? You thought, shit, I wish I came up with that. That's all right. Franklin, what do you? Yeah, you persuaded other people. Franklin, what do you think?
The first thing that pops to mind, Kaiser Permanente, for those who don't know, is both an insurer and a provider. So we're on both sides of the house, and our nearest competitor in the Mid-Atlantic region is a company called MedStar, and they do exactly what we do, but they take patients from all over. They take so like if you've got Anthem or you've got United, then you can go to a MedStar facility. Kaiser Permanente, you actually have to be a member, so it is a closed system. We don't like to talk about that, but it is a closed system. And so MedStar came up with a really, really, really brilliant ad campaign, and it was called "This Is How We Treat People." And it was about the heart and mind of healthcare, and just from a national level, we had never really figured out like how to kind of talk about ourselves, and MedStar had just figured it out, and and in my opinion, kind of conceptually ran laps around us when it came to how to describe their health system in a way that was meaningful, approachable, and snackable. And so I found that very persuasive.
Brynna, last word before we open it up to questions here.
I feel like jealousy is just like the world that I live in, jealous of other people's work. I was at the Andes last night and like, holy shit, there's so much amazing work that's getting done. Like the first things that pop into my head are like the flock spot from TBWA for Apple. Ugh, amazing. So jealous of that. There's the Dramamine bag thing from SEB. There's just like constantly jealous. And I think that that's what keeps me excited about the business.
Yeah.
So could make you a full list. I actually have a full list of.
I'll follow up with you afterwards.
I'll send that to you.
All right, guys, we've got a few minutes for questions. If anybody has anything on, for our lovely panelists on persuading in a kind of chaotic environment. Looks like we've got a mic here. What do you think, guys? All right. Tim, who asked a very memorable question last year. Sorry, I don't mean to set the bar that high. Oh, we do? Oh, okay. Great. Yeah, right here.
Hi, my name is Maria. Very nice to meet you, and thank you for this amazing conversation. I'm curious about culture. You mentioned and you spoke about culture. How do you keep track with what is the culture around your customers? Because that's not necessarily the same bubble where you live. So I'm curious, tools like some tips. How do you keep track with culture?
How do you keep up with culture outside of your bubble?
It's tough. We have amazing strategists that do a lot of data and research that help us with that, but it's really tough because the bubbles are so real. I think we've realized that in the past couple of years more than ever before. It's one of the biggest challenges. It's all the people screaming at the same time. So it's tough, and lots of research is the answer that I have.
Yeah, I would echo that too. Just a lot of data. I mean, it really depends on who your audiences are, but on my team, we rely on a lot of data around media consumption patterns of our audiences and what they care about and all of their demographic data. And then, there's like the consumer marketing team, and they're doing a lot of research on, what everything from like meme culture to, who are the best like micro-influencers to partner with that would make sense for our audiences. So there's just a lot. I think you just really have to double down on data. And we do have people that focus specifically on like culture stuff. So yeah, it's very important.
Thank you. Also, the game is rigged. James gives me these questions before. That's why I think of the smart questions. So the essential difference between reason and emotion.
Yeah.
Reason leads to conclusions. Emotion leads to action. In advertising, we've used that a lot. As emotion is wonky, make people feel some things. We threw horses, puppies, and boobs to sell beer and burgers. but now it's pretty clear that outrage tops all three of them. Why are we so afraid, or how can we use outrage? How can we channel outrage in a smart way instead of emotional advertising is better than reasonable? No, let's be clear about the emotion that we're trying to provoke and how can we use it for good in your business, for the wider world, during Thanksgiving dinner, Franklin, if you will.
So I think outrage. One of the things that I have been advocating for a long time, and we are starting to finally kind of move that way, is Kaiser Permanente going to war with the status quo of healthcare, right? It is sick care. It is broken. The onus is on the patient to manage the mechanics and logistics of care, like all of that stuff. It's bad, right? No matter how, and there's no one to root for, right? Greedy doctors, greedy hospitals, like whose side are you on, right? So when we talk about outrage, right, you can be outraged at that system, and then we can direct it into something that's positive. I think a lot of the outrage, though, that I've been experiencing is a function of in-group and out-group dynamics, which is poison and toxic. But it is hugely effective and has been forever. And anyone who has been to high school knows, has been on the business end of it at some point. So I would kind of stay away from outrage, but I would, as a marketer and a brand person, identify what is broken, what the world could look like if we fix it, and then prove that the brand has the tools to do so with the audience's assistance and permission. I think as long as brands, institutions, politicians, whomever, decide that the only way to get us to act is to turn up the outrage meter to 11, we're going to burn ourselves out, and I don't know. I mean, I don't want to imagine the worst, but you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. No good can come from it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think in my mind, provoking outrage is something that we saw for a long time in a lot of cause marketing in the past, where it's like, show people the problem, make them fucking angry about it. The reaction to that was, what do I do with this? Like, I have this anger, where do I put it? What do I do with it? And I think that is also something that's echoed right now online with how people are just feeling about the world, no matter what it is. Like, if you are feeling that outrage, they want to know what to do with it. So I think, in my mind, if we're going to be provoking that specific emotion, it has to come with and here's how to channel it. Here's how to fix the problem. Here's how to make it better. So you have to have a way to release that tension. You can't just leave people holding it.
I did a talk for nonprofits, right? Mm-hmm. And there was this shift about kind of like, as my grandmother used to say, you're doing God's work. It wasn't this binary, like you're doing good or you're not doing good, but it was help us build the world you want to see, which is a little more nuanced in that, to your point, right? Because if you're just saying like, this is broken and you should be angry about it, that just leads to frustrated people who then act out in different ways. And that's not helpful.
Or they hate your piece of communication, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you remind them of how powerless they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Good question.
I think brands need to be careful, though, to not, suggest that they are going to solve all of your problems or, soothe all of your outrage. So I don't know. I think that there's ways to kind of like thread the needle where there are things that brands can tap into in the zeitgeist of the outrage zeitgeist of the moment. Like things around kitchen table issues, unemployment, and for DoorDash, for example, like offering flexible working opportunities is like the ethos of the company. And I think that that is something that is woven into all the storytelling we do about Dashers, regardless of their background and their different unique stories. And I think that there's something that we can hopefully tap into in a way that helps share a thoughtful story that resonates with people, but without like getting to the point where we're coming in and saying, hey, DoorDash is gonna solve all of your problems here, because that's not gonna be the case. So I just don't love it personally as a consumer when brands try to get on their pedestal and make it seem like they're gonna, pull a Sarah McLachlan for you.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I think as long as you have like a solution, even if it's a little bit of a solution, because I think that the DoorDash
Let's make
one
your
is the
day a little
perfect
bit
one.
better.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a little bit of something like the flexible working options that can help with a little bit with one issue. Like I think even just having a little bit of a solution, a little bit of an action that you can take gives you a right to play there, but totally agree. Like no hero brands coming to the rescue and saving the day from the outrage, because nobody wants that.
Yeah, one bite at a time.
All right, guys. I think that, we got time for 2 more questions. All right.
Yeah, hi. I was just going to take that language you're using and just take some of the charge out of it. Outrage is bad, but I find shock and surprise is so big right now. And persuading through the chaos often means when Levi's partners with Chobani, that has such a weird shock factor that pushes through the chaos. And it used to be that brands were all about how do I make an idea that makes the most sense? And now I think it's how do I make an idea that makes the least sense and make it make sense? And thoughts on like the less charged version of outrage, which I agree with everything you said. What's the sort of softer version of that in shock and surprise?
So let's change surprise to delight. Because I read there's a book by a woman named Carmen Simon called "Impossible to Ignore," and it talks about memory. And basically, one of the premises in her book is that nobody really likes surprises because our brain is designed to predict the future. So the delight part of it, like, oh, Levi's is doing something with Chobani. Well, how unexpected, how delightful, right? I think is probably something that could be positioned better within the marketplace, right? That it's always something fun, it's always something pleasant, something good is going to come from it. It's not a tiger popping out of a cave, that sort of thing.
Right up front.
So for the delights of the future, what do you see? We talk about the past 10 years. What doesn't work today and worked in the past 10 years? What do you see in the next 10 to 20 years would work effectively, magically for Persuasion and not necessarily is that big yet today?
Looking forward, 5, 10, 15
Yeah,
years.
wow.
10 to 20, 10 to 20
20
years.
is a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think we've touched on it a little bit with like the micro influencers and speaking to people the way that they want to be spoken to and the way that they are speaking themselves. And I think that will become increasingly more relevant and more the case. We actually on our prep call talked a little bit about Nutter Butter and their TikTok, which I am not the target demographic. It is wild, but like it's working and it's so weird and out there and fantastic that it's really resonating with Gen Z, which is the point, right?
Part of the surprise and delight that we were just talking about.
Exactly. It goes back to that surprise and delight. So yeah, I think it's that, and then combining it with that emotional relevance. I think that again, like that will be a thing no matter where we are, no matter what platform comes out next.
What I'm afraid of is a radical personalization of media. That media consumption that then becomes individualized, and we become even more siloed. So that I think is probably something to watch out for. Like, you know, our engagement with AI, the algorithms are going to get much smarter because now, I mean, we're feeding the machine so much more than we were before. Now we're actually like having conversations with it and telling it our hopes and dreams.
Arguments with it though, so that's good. Yeah.
I mean, one. I won one.
Take the win.
Now it
Take
knows
the
how
win.
to beat me. You know what I mean? Controls my lights. But yes. I mean, it could be wonderful, right? To have the, to have a media ecosystem built around our personal tastes, but it could also be very isolating. So I think that's something that could be a double-edged sword.
All right, guys, we've got time for one last one right back here.
Hey, almost piggybacking off of the topic of just the outrage conversation. We all have felt the effects of it, and I am curious as to hear your perspective on what are the rather more ideal and or optimal constructive emotions to draw on to get the ideal effect in order to draw the heuristic impulsive decision-making factors when it comes to marketing for our ideal audience.
Hope. You got to give people something to hope for. That, we buy to make our lives better, or we buy to avoid something bad from happening, right? So when you think about it, every purchase is an act of hope. I think at the end of the day, that's what we have to sell. At least in healthcare, that's what we're selling. I don't have a distinctive product that you can hold in your hand. I'm selling you a state of mind and a hopeful state of mind that we will treat you we will keep you healthy, and we will treat you when you are sick. And I think that's probably the best. That's to me. That's marketing like 401. You know what I mean? The most advanced kind you can get.
Well, I think it's ending on a hopeful note is a really smart place to leave it. So we're going to do that. Thank you guys so much, and thank you guys for listening.